Hello and welcome. Today, we're going to be talking about how to position better in VGC. Let's get right into it. Now, this is a pretty difficult topic to approach because there's a lot that could happen on any turn in VGC. It is a very deep and complex game, but the main thing you want to be thinking about is how do I get my offensive Pokemon in a position to sweep, and how do I stop theirs from doing so? And the first thing that we need to talk about in regards to this goal is how to evaluate a board state. And the way we do that is actually very similar to how we evaluate the lead matchup, like we talked about last week. And the number one thing that you need to be thinking about is matchup counting, except this time it's on the board itself rather than in team preview. So now I want to take you through a sample game that I played this last week and talk about it through the lens of positioning. So here we have turn one of a game that I played this last week, and the first thing we're going to do is check the matchups. So we see that Palafin is positive into Talonflame and is neutral into Gholdengo, while Incineroar is positive into Talonflame and Gholdengo. So Palafin is +1 into the board, and Incineroar is +2 in the board. So we get to talk about, okay, what if I am positive matchup-wise into the board? And this is when you need to capitalize on the pressure that you have. So we have the pressure, we have a very safe play of just going for Flare Blitz and Jet Punch, just double attacking here because our Pokemon aren't really at any significant danger. You might think, oh, but you want to switch out Palafin and get it activated. Not necessarily true. Now, Palafin's kind of a weird Pokemon because it's unique, with its transformation ability, but you can just think of it in this scenario like, I have my Water type and my Fire type against a Fire type and a Steel type. And so this is a very positive board for us, so we have the option of just staying in and attacking and getting guaranteed damage here. Now, you could make a read, right? You could say, okay, well, my opponent's in a bad position, so they're going to try and switch. I could read that, but the point is, on a turn like this, nothing really horrible and terrible can happen to you, so you can just go ahead and attack and try to capitalize on the pressure right away. Okay, so you'll see they are going to realize that they are in a negative board position, and they are going to go ahead and switch out so that they get into a positive board state. And this is now we can talk about, okay, well, what if I don't have a positive matchup into the board? Now, you see, I didn't make any fancy play. It's just turn one, game one. I just attacked what was in front of me. You don't have to do that, okay? Because they probably are going to switch. Now we're in a negative board state. And when you're in a negative board state like this, that's when you have to consider, how do I get the tempo back in my favor? And this is when, you should consider switching. So you'll see that my opponent was on the back foot. They had a board that was negative into my board, so they switched. And guess what? Now we're going to do the same thing. I don't want to, just attack straight into this and potentially, lose Incineroar and take a bunch of damage on Palafin. So now I am going to do what they did and also double switch into my Pokemon on the back so that I now have a positive matchup. So you see now I have Ninetales and Amoonguss in against Garchomp and Samurott. Now notice, like I said last week, our opponents have brains. This is something we have to keep in mind always, okay? I'm going to hammer this point home every video. You have to think about what your opponent is doing. And so they very correctly don't just go for a water move into Incineroar. They go for knockoff, predicting a switch, and so they hit the Amoonguss on the switch in with a knockoff. And so this is how you can kind of, take advantage of having a good board state. So I didn't take advantage of my opponent's negative board state. They took advantage of mine. And so that's how we got to this position that we're in now. So now let's just continue going through this game and see how it plays out. Okay, we have the positive board state, so our opponent is going to switch into Gholdengo, and here's where, I know my opponent's going to switch into Gholdengo because it's positive into Ninetales and Amoonguss. So I am anticipating Gholdengo coming in, and so I need to bring in Incineroar. And now we're in a position where, okay, they've protected their Samurott, Ninetales is on the field, Incineroar's on the field, and now we're in kind of a neutral board state, right? Incineroar is positive into Gholdengo, negative into Samurott, and Ninetales is positive into Samurott and negative into Gholdengo. Okay, so now we're in a neutral board state. Now, what you need to be thinking about is what's my end game win condition? And in this particular game, my end game win condition is sweeping with Palafin. So now that we've seen the four that my opponents brought, I know that the only thing that's stopping my Palafin sweep, excuse me, is the Samurott. So That should inform your decision making going forward. Okay, I know that they just protected. I have a safe attack into this slot, and so I am willing to make a trade here of Ninetales for Samurott, especially because if their Golden Ghost stays in and attacks, that means that they will go down to Incineroar. And I don't necessarily need Samurott gone from the battle before Palafin can sweep. I just need it weakened, or I need enough other stuff taken care of so that I can then clean it up with my remaining Pokemon. So here I'm very comfortable making the trade of Ninetales for Samurott because it means that it opens up Palafin. And if they're switching out Samurott, they're losing tempo, okay? This is another thing I want you to be thinking about. Tempo is very important. And, if your opponent has to switch, that's negative tempo. That means we get an advantage. They're losing time by switching instead of attacking. So from this point on, I'm just going to kind of play through the battle kind of quickly, and you'll see that we're just going to make some trades and eventually get down to a board state where Palafin is going to win. So they protect on the freeze dry, and here, I'm always willing to make this trade because I know what my win condition is, and I'm fine with them going for Make It Rain here. We're going to pick up the Gholdengo, and now we're in a position where, okay, Palafin can just clean up. We're going to get rid of the Talonflame. Garchomp is going to go for a Breaking Swipe, which is kind of an interesting tech that my opponent has. But even if they have Dragon Claw, it's not going to KO there. And then I can always just clean up with Palafin and Amoonguss in the back here. The reason that we won this game is because I was able to preserve my win condition for the end game. So on turn 2, I could have stayed in with Palafin and gone for a Wave Crash into Garchomp, right? But here's something I want you to understand is, just because there is a KO available on the board doesn't mean that you should go for it if it means our win condition is going to take too much damage. So you saw how the game ended there. I needed to be able to eat a hit or two with Palafin such that I could then sweep my opponent's remaining Pokemon with it. So if you have a Pokemon that you need in the end game, even if it can take a KO right away, you should probably preserve it until your sweep is ready, until you've depleted them of enough resources. So that is a very important concept, is preserving your win condition, okay? And then when we're in a neutral board state, like you saw in the Ninetales Incineroar versus Gholdengo and Samurott turn, even if they switch Samurott out there, I know they just protected, so Freeze Dry is going to pick up some damage and make it easier for the game to end anyways, right? You always want to be thinking about, okay, how do I get my Pokemon that have positive matchups in front of their positive matchups? And so if they switch Samurott out there, I know that they're going to have to take some damage on Talonflame or Garchomp, and that's going to make it easier for Amoonguss to be in front of their Samurott and answer that in the end game. So you see what I'm saying here? You kind of just want to make sure that you're taking positive value trades so that way your sweepers are opened up. You want to make sure that when you have solid plays, when you have guaranteed play, there's very little that's guaranteed in Pokemon, right? So when a Pokemon just protects, when you see that a Pokemon doesn't have protecting, you can get guaranteed damage into that slot. It simplifies the game. And when you simplify the game, it makes it easier for your win conditions to do their job. So, in conclusion, positioning is about being able to evaluate the board state, count the matchups, and then using that information to make a play. Okay, if we're in a positive board state, we need to capitalize on our pressure and anticipate our opponent's response or take guaranteed damage if it's there. If we're in a negative board state, we have to consider switching. We have to consider ways to position our offensive Pokemon using our defensive pivots. So like in the turn where we knew that we had a board that was double weak to Gholdengo, we anticipated it coming in and switched an Incineroar. Those are the things you kind of need to be looking for. You have to anticipate, okay, what does my opponent have that is positive into what I have on the board right now? And then that's how you can anticipate their switch-ins and be in a positive position at the start of the turn. We also talked about preserving a win condition. Okay, don't just take the KOs that are right in front of you. You have to be thinking about the end game. You have to be thinking about, okay, which Pokemon do I need for each of their Pokemon and how do I get it in front of them? And a way you can make this easier is by simplifying the board, taking trades, taking guaranteed damage. You don't necessarily know exactly how every turn is going to play out and exactly how every game is going to go. But the more damage that you do and the more KOs start to fall, you know what you can do to get your Pokemon where they need to be. And again, I just want to iterate that Pokemon is a very hard game. You don't necessarily know what's going to happen every game. You don't know how every game is going to go, but hopefully this gives you some questions that you can ask yourself while you're playing so that you can better direct your plays and get into better positions. Thank you for watching.